Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. My name is Ida Cutler, and I'm a bookseller at Women and Children First, one of the last remaining feminist bookstores in the United States, located in Chicago, Illinois. Thank you all so much for being here with us tonight. Before every event, we acknowledge that the land that Women and Children First is situated on is the land of several tribal nations, the Potawatomi, Ojibwe, Odawa, the Sac, Fox, Miamia, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee. We recognize these nations as the traditional occupants of the land and its importance for the 65,000 indigenous people living there today. Furthermore, it is WCF's mission to use books as tools for liberation and amplify unrepresented voices. With this land acknowledgement, we recognize the importance of providing books that include information on the ongoing legacies of indigenous peoples, as well as their dispossession and the white settler colonialism that our store has benefited from. On to tonight's event. Tonight, it is my honor to be hosting the celebration of the book Make Your Art No Matter What by Beth Pickens. I've been reading this book and telling everyone I know about it, and I've sort of been referring to it as the variety show of self-help books. The wisdom and practical advice offered in this book comes in passages packaged with all sorts of tones, textures, humors. It was a delight to read, and I'm still thinking about many parts. I'm going to tell you a little bit about these two lovely people on screen with me. Beth is a Los Angeles-based consultant for artists and arts organizations. She is the author of Make Your Art No Matter What, of course, and Your Art Will Save Your Life. Her popular podcast, Mind Your Practice, is widely available, as is her subscription-based homework club. She teaches at California Institute of the Arts. She's joined in conversation tonight with Marcia Chatelain, who I just listened to on NPR's Code Switch podcast today, completely coincidentally. So weird. I woke up and was listening to it and I was like, wait a minute. I'm seeing them. She teaches history and African American studies at Georgetown University, the author of Southside Girls Growing Up in the Great Migration and franchise The Golden Arches in Black America. Both books can be purchased from our store. She's a Chicago native residing in Washington, D.C. Before we begin, I just want to say if you have yet to order the book, you can do so anytime at womenandchildrenfirst.com or by clicking that teal button that says Buy Book Here. I don't know if you see it. That's where it is. Take a moment to get situated and familiar with it. You can buy any of Marcia's books, any of Beth's books, any book at all. We are currently offering both curbside pickup if you're located in Chicago. If not, we offer shipping. And we also, our store is open to limited capacity now. So come and visit us. Come see us. During the event, be sure to drop a question for Beth using the Ask a Question feature. There's that little button below. Or drop it in the chat and I will migrate it over. We'll get to the questions at the end of the event. So I'm going to go away now, and I will turn it over to Beth and Marcia.
Yay! Thank you so much, Women and Children First, a feminist bookstore. I see there's almost 200 people here tonight, and what I'm hoping is that later this week, Women and Children First tell me that at least 200 books, not just mine, all books were purchased tonight from this store. Marcia, thank you so much for being here with me.
Beth, thank you for writing this book. It's so good.
It was my pleasure. It was my pleasure. It wasn't a pleasure at all, but I had a book contract, so I needed to finish it.
Listen, this is how it works sometimes. So Beth, would you like to grace us with a passage from the book?
Yes, I'm going to read a very short piece. I'm going to read you the conclusion so that you know what you're getting into if you read this book. It's very, very brief, and it summarizes the book in its entirety. Conclusion, page 201. Oh, tempora, oh, mores. I have no other lifetime to compare this to, but living in the early 21st century is a wild ride. You know what makes it better? Your art. Please keep making it. If you've skipped to the conclusion to get the Cliff's Notes, I suppose it all boils down to this. Your life is finite, and you should make your art. Things will get in the way, and you should still make your art. Return to your art over and over again. You will find clarity and answers as you feed this vital part of yourself. As you build and maintain a consistent practice, you will find the other parts of living a modern life seem more manageable. As you drift away from your practice, things get unmanageable again. That's life. You will fall away from a practice, and you are always invited to return to it in this moment and this one and this one. Your art is always waiting for you. The end.
Wow, Beth, that's so beautiful. And so I want us to start from the beginning. You have had an incredible career in the arts, ensuring that people have the necessities to create at incredibly high levels. Many of your clients have gone on to do incredible things. And I want to ask you a little bit about where you found yourself in that relationship to the arts world. How did you come to interact with artists in the way that you do?
Mm-hmm. When I was a teenager, as you know, I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was a bleak place to grow up in the 90s. And the Andy Warhol Museum opened up when I was a teenager. And that was a very formative experience for me because it was the first time I saw sort of like queer life reflected back at me and interesting things and people. And I realized I just have to get out of here and go find more of these people. And so that seed was planted for me when I was about 15. And then fast forward college, where we were together in Columbia, Missouri.
Absolutely.
Shout out to NU Tigers.
Woo!
It's our 20-year college graduation anniversary this
God.
year.
Amazing.
I know, it's insane. But so after our undergraduate years, I went on to get a graduate degree in counseling psychology. And after that, I moved to San Francisco because I wanted to be in the place where all the queer writers and artists were making all of the art that I'd been taking in for so long. And I knew I wanted to be near and with artists. And I didn't really know how. But when I got to San Francisco, I had moved there for a health and human services job. And I realized right away that was not for me and that I just wanted to work in the arts. I just wanted to be surrounded by artists. So I started working in the arts, doing a lot of different things. And then 11 years ago, I realized I had this dormant counseling degree, this master's degree with all the student loan debt to go with it. And I was helping to run a queer artist retreat started by a literary organization I was working with. And I heard all of the artists talking about their concerns and their fears and all the stuff that goes on for writers and artists. And I had this light bulb moment of, wait a second, I have training to help them and I work in the arts. So I kind of know specifically about their discipline. So I started this consulting practice that brings together my counseling training with all of my experience working in the arts and being a person who loves art so much. So that's how this career path started. And then books came about because, luckily books do. And that's a way to sort of spread my services around beyond my individual client capacity.
Well, one of the things that is interesting, and if you haven't read Beth's first book, I recommend that you do so to improve the quality of your own life. It's called Your Art Will Save Your Life. And you wrote that in a very specific political moment. And what's interesting about Make Your Art No Matter What is that you're kind of making these distinctions between these situational places we find ourselves in, right? And having barriers to create. But this book is kind of evergreen. These are the barriers that we will have, whether or not, the political climate isn't working for us, whether we have all the money or no money. Can you tell me a little bit about your decision to kind of maybe take a step back and think of the broader issues that artists have in committing to their practice?
It froze for a second. I missed what you said. Can you tell me about your decision too? And then my computer.
To write this book kind of in the vein of these are the broad things, right? These are the things that are evergreen in the life of an artist.
Yeah. Well, so of course, with the first book, I was really responding to the artists in my life, their reaction to the Trump administration and that horror of that moment at the end of 2016. And I knew that I wanted to write a book that was more general self-help that could sort of address the really big things that come up in my clients' lives over and over and over again, because I can only work with 60 to 70 people in my caseload at a time. I can't really have more than that. And I wanted to be able to be of service to more people. So I thought I'm going to pull from all of the lessons, everything that I've gleaned from all of my clients over the years and write something that addresses what I see as our, 10 to 15 of the biggest issues that people confront. And that's what I set out to do with this book.
And what's amazing about it, it's not only beautifully designed, but it actually works through kind of the basic things that you say, I don't have enough time. And it concludes with death and God. And I think that there's something really amazing how you have us trust you more and more to go to those really difficult places. But I want us to talk a little bit about time, because this is probably the most common thing, right? I would have written 40 books by now had I had more time. And you hear that constantly in the life of creative people. What are some of the ways that you think about how artists understand time that can be helpful in order to push through those barriers?
Yeah. Well, time is so much about perception. So much of it is about perception, which is why I opened that chapter actually with this profound quote by a writer who wrote one of my favorite books, A Dictionary of Marcia. When I read that phrase that time is a hostage to the power of perception, I was like, yes, so much about our relating to time is about our perception and understanding of it. Then there's the real tactical things of time and creating space. But I think particularly over the past 13 months, more people understand how much of our relationship to time is about perception and the quality of time. It's not about the actual numbers of hours, days, and seconds. And for artists, time's first in the book because this is a perpetual, it's sort of like an animating anxiety in everybody's life that I encounter. And for artists, I find that they have this sort of perpetual fear of how will I make all of the things in this lifetime that I want to make? I'm afraid that I don't have enough time, and now I feel like it's already gone. That's what happens to us so often with time, is when we create space for ourselves, we can be so anxious about that time and put so much pressure on it that we feel as though we've wasted it before it ever even happened. And then that can create this guilt and shame loop of, see, I don't even deserve free time. I don't even like it. I don't even enjoy it. I'm a bad person. Creates just this terrible shame loop, which makes it difficult for a person to then prioritize the time that they want to turn up the things that they want more of in their life. Because whatever, I say this over and over in that chapter, what we feed is what will grow. The things we give more time to is what will get bigger in our lives.
And one of the things that, is so connected to, again, these perceptions of how other people are doing it. I think that this is a common theme in every chapter, that you have clients and people you encounter who can always look to someone who has, all of the time because of X, Y, and Z. And one of the things that I think really distinguishes your practice is your engagement with money. One of the, I think, best things that you do with artists is really talk about money in ways that are not about, one day you will monetize, but money is a reality that we all have to confront. What are the ways that in your practice that you have addressed these issues with money and artists?
Yeah. Well, a lot of my clients have a lot of different kinds of money damage. They have cultural sort of mistrust and distaste for money. They have lots of damage from different intersecting identities about even having access to money. Everyone is born into a different class and then becomes aware of that at some point in their life and starts to understand how class works. And for artists are this distinct kind of worker that they're the only worker, to my knowledge, that has paying jobs in order to have their job. So artists have this extra layer of bullshit when it comes to money, because the culture tells them that you're never going to get money. You shouldn't even want it, that somehow there's some purity of something. And art schools definitely reinforce that. And that there's going to be this perpetual lack. And then the art world creates this scarcity where there is none, there is no scarcity of resources. And so when artists come to me, they have many intersecting points of a bad relationship to money. And it's a thing that we need and that can do a lot of really good things in a person's life. Like, I want all of my clients to have all the money while they also have their critical consciousness about money. I want both to exist at the same time. But the backdrop to all of that is emotional, psychological, and behavioral issues with money that we actually have to address first.
And when you think about like a culture of scarcity and a culture of competition among artists, what are some of the ways that you help people kind of get on the other side of it? Because so many, when you talk about creative hurdles, we think about writer's block or, I'm in a slump, I can't create. But sometimes a lot of those hurdles are about, like you said, perception. What are some of the conversations that you have with artists that you think are most helpful in working through that?
Yeah, well, it's unlearning compare and despair, trying to compare somebody else's outsides to our insides, and dismantling this false notion that we're in competition with other people when actually we need other people to get anywhere and to have anything. And that having an active community of working artists who want good things for themselves and each other is the biggest resource an artist can have. There is no problem that can't be solved by a group of artists who all want good things for one another. So it's sort of just like understanding what the cultural messages there exist and then doing the opposite. Just like keep doing the opposite of whatever the dominant culture has told you about living as an artist.
Well, one of the things that you talk about, and if you haven't joined Beth's Homework Club is an excellent subscription service of community in which we talk about these very issues. And the last Homework Club, I think, was about asking. And this is something that was really, really powerful in your book. Examples of artists who are unable to ask for things that people want to give them. And so what are some of the ways that you think about the process of asking that can be helpful for people who need that support but aren't quite sure how to identify it?
Yeah. The asking chapter was the very first chapter I wrote of the book. It was actually in the book proposal because it was the one that sort of just plunked down out of the sky when I asked myself, what does everyone struggle with that I've ever worked with? And I was like, it's asking for help. It's asking for things. It's taking up space and saying, I want and need things and being willing to put that out there. And it's difficult for 100% of the people I've ever worked with. And so how I get people to sort of move toward willingness is to first identify, like, well, what are some things that you want and need? What are the different kinds of support, whether it's logistical or emotional or community or financial, like what kinds of things would help you in your life live as an artist and have a better experience of that? And then when we identify that, we start to find paths. So how can you get that? How can you participate in community where you can give and receive, where you can give to the resources and receive from the resources? It's really, I think, about growing the willingness. It's just willing. If we're willing to do something, that's the battle right there. So becoming willing to ask is transformative.
And in the process of seeing, like, for someone who has the pleasure and the honor of working with you one-on-one, no, I mean, seriously, because it's a big deal. If you get on that train, it's a really big deal. But when people work with you, I mean, what are the ways, like, what are the benchmarks of growth, right? I think it's always really curious because you play such a pivotal role in the lives of artists and help them develop these things, but your relationship is confidential, right? Like there's a way that you are present, but people may not know kind of your influence. So how do you see those benchmarks articulate themselves in people's creative practices?
I think there's internal and external benchmarks. And the internal is about life quality and how a person feels about themselves and how they feel about their choices and the possibility for the future. So sort of, can we shift their thinking ever toward feeling more satisfied with themselves and their practices and their relationships and just having a better and better relationship to themselves? That's really important to me with all of my clients, because everything on the outside will be built on top of that interior experience. And then for each person, we're identifying, well, what are some of the external things you want that we can start working toward? And that is related to money and success and external opportunities. And sometimes as a person's internal life shifts, the external things shift too. What they thought they wanted might change, or how important that one residency was maybe isn't so much anymore. And I think it's the biggest benchmark that I'm trying to achieve with everyone, whether or not I articulate it clearly to them, is that they understand that their creative practice, that this is a lifelong relationship they'll have to themselves, and that the value of it is bigger than money. That's one of the things I want them to get. But the value of their creative practice and their relationship to themselves as artists is that they will have a better quality of life. And then all of the things that come from that are sort of bonus. That's the good stuff that we build on top of that. So yeah, it's really a mixture of internal and external that I'm gauging for.
One of the, I think, most gripping chapters in the book is about grief. And I think that when we think about, the cast of characters of books that are not as good as yours about the creative process, there's certain things that they will kind of go through. But I think that your naming of grief as a real barrier, and that grief that doesn't just come from one personal loss, but historical trauma, the grief of encountering your work, right? The grief about all of the things around you, I thought was so powerful. And in light of the fact that, we're part of this kind of collective grieving moment over COVID, what are the ways that you see kind of on this side of the pandemic, your artists grappling with the grief that isn't quite a settled grief in this moment?
Yeah. Well, certainly in my lifetime, people's work, their books and their art has been what has facilitated my own grief, my ability to feel things in real time or closer to real time. And something that occurred to me about midway through the panic, wherever we are now, the pandemic. So this was maybe late spring, early summer of 2020. It occurred to me that all of the work artists were going to make over the next 2 years was going to have a very central cultural role in helping people en masse move through grief that is stuck inside of us right now, because there is so much grief in such a short, condensed period of time on a mass scale, and then in individual people's lives, and no one's untouched from it. So with all of that grief happening, people hit a threshold where they can't really feel it anymore, and people start to feel numb, and it gets kind of stuck inside of us. So I think some people, many of us, have our feelings of grief are sort of bound up inside, and we don't know how to get them to move. And so the work artists are making and going to put out into the world is what's going to help the culture sort of move through their feelings of grief. And so last spring, late spring, early summer, it occurred to me, okay, I've got to get my clients ready. I have to make sure they're making their work and that they're in process of feeling their feelings. They sort of have to be frontline workers emotionally. They need to be ready at the front end so that they can produce all of their cultural contributions that will then be out in the world to help the larger culture experience its grief and move through it. And so I became very focused on how, with each individual person, how can we make sure you are still in your process, you're still in your projects, you're still helping them get out into the world, and that you are working to feel your feelings in real time, because a lot of other people are not going to have that capacity. And artists are going to have a very vital role in people. I hate to use the word healing, because healing feels so absurd at this point, but in people sort of moving through the experience that we're in. And so I felt like that was a really important role. And grief, I mean, every artist deals with grief, because every person does. And artists have to plumb and mine their grief all the time to make their projects. And that's a big ask of a human being. Like, go be in your pain, make something out of it, and then give it to me so that I can feel better. And yet that's the exchange that's happening over and over. And my life would be worse if they didn't do that.
Well, it's such a fascinating way of thinking about it, because, so much of kind of artists aren't constantly producing. Audiences aren't always prepared or ready for what they have. And so I think about this in terms of, all of these projects will be inflicted with COVID. Like we have, with the conclusion of the Derek Chauvin trial yesterday, it's like there was an entire kind of 9-month period where the George Floyd summer starts to kind of seep into the cultures in some beautiful and powerful ways, in some kind of terrible ways, right? And so I guess my question for you is that, like, when you see these particular moments animating itself in the life of the work of artists, what are the ways that, like, they manage the weight of that? Because, people continue to produce, but the larger culture may not be ready or embrace it. I mean, I think that there's something about reception too that must also be part of why people have creative hurdles.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I think artists certainly are a group of people who help us begin to make sense of nonsensical, incomprehensible experiences. And so the trauma and violence that people witnessed again or were cluing into for the first time last summer is incomprehensible for people, or it's so painful that it sort of, again, can sort of shut somebody down emotionally. And I think what artists and many of my clients have been incorporating or responding to their grief over murder and trauma for the past 9 months into their work in literal ways and in abstract ways, but it's woven in. And so what can be, in a time when people feel very down on abstract work and people will think, well, if my work isn't literal or political in a legible way, then it won't be valuable. But that is not always something an audience can receive in a moment. And so when people are weaving in their grief and their processing of incomprehensible events into work in abstract ways, that also has a way of disseminating into the culture and having impact too. So I don't know what I think about that, except to say that for people who fear, have confusion, or feel as though they're not making work in a legible way for the culture in any particular moment, whatever you're doing, whatever an artist is doing is metabolizing their experiences of the outside world. And however that gets disseminated is okay, because there are audiences who will be able to receive that and in fact maybe can only receive information in that way. I think about experimental music in that way, that might be experimental music, or other experimental forms might be a way in which people feel like my work isn't overtly tackling something, but it's infusing everything that's you into it. And so an audience might be able to receive that when they couldn't receive something that is overtly political because their pain receptors are so full. Went off a long tangent, but I hope that was
it's always
something or
content.
anything.
Seriously, well, good. No, it really is. I mean, I think that the other kind of bigger kind of question that you pose to artists in this text is, do we see our art as, do we believe in what we are saying that we believe in? And how are we kind of letting that show up in our lives? And, you end in this really powerful way of saying, like, we have to think about death and God and our own like mortality as part of this. And I'm curious if this was like a choice that you knew you were going to end this way, because the chapter before is like marketing. So when you get to marketing, you're like, okay, I thought that was hard. And they're like, oh no, there's death and God here too, right?
Which one is more triggering, marketing or death? I'd love to do a poll right now for artists, because I think it's probably marketing.
Marketing is a lot worse. But I'm curious about your choice of leaving us with that note of death and God.
Yeah. Well, that was not in the proposal. There was no chapter about death and God in the proposal. I can't remember what I omitted for that, but I felt like when I was writing the manuscript, contemplative death practice is such an ongoing part of my life. I felt like I couldn't ignore it. Also because, and I don't address this in the chapter, but death and God are the central themes of art history. It is people grappling with death and grappling with God and afterlife. That is art history, even though that is not exactly what the chapter is about. But death and God in modernity are also subjects that we need artists to explain to us and reflect to us. We need antiquity in art history, and we need contemporary work. Exploring spirituality, exploring the spiritual interior and the human experience, and that human experience ends in all the different ways that it does. And what does that mean? And I want all of my clients to have a spiritual interior that they relate to their art practice. And that for many of them, a big part of their spiritual interior is their art practice. Mm-hmm. And that's something I start right off the bat with every new client, is asking them about their spiritual interior and their spiritual experience of the world, whatever that is, however it makes sense to them. And part of that is death and mortality. So if we begin with time, and people struggle with time, is that they know, even if they're not thinking about consciously, that their time is finite and they're going to die. And that creates fear and anxiety about, how will I do all the things in this world that I want to do in the time that I have? Well, then at the end, I want to talk about how you do that is by confronting that reality in gentle, manageable ways, that this is a reality that my time will be finite. So who do I want to be, and how do I want to live? Who do I want to be in the world? How do I want to live? And how can I prioritize the things that to me right now are important? How can I feed those things while I'm here? And I never mean that chapter or any contemplative death practice to be a max out all your credit cards and party, right?
A lot of YOLO.
So yellow. I mean for it to be a gentle thing, and for people who are maybe encountering death for the first time, or that's something they avoid ever thinking about or talking about, it can be paralyzing emotionally to even like utter. But I have found that in my life, it's one of the most useful spiritual tools, and I think it can be for artists too. And because artists have such an important role in explaining death and asking questions about it and communicating about death and dying, I sort of want this entire group of humans, all artists, to know that that is territory for you. By virtue of being born, this is territory that you get to explore. And here are some hopefully gentle ways to encounter it.
One of the things that you make very clear on the outset of the book, and I would argue aggressively, is that you say, I am not an artist. That this is like not who I am. And I don't know. Are you not an artist?
I'm really not. And here's how I know.
How do you
everyone benefits from creative exploration. It's good for everyone. And I'm good at most things because I'm a Capricorn. And so I've even been good at some things that I do. But what I observe in artists that I work with and artists that I know and the artists that I'm married to is that for artists, the creative exploration, the creative work isn't an option. It's not a luxury. It's a thing that is required in order for them to have a satisfactory life. It's sort of like I have to do certain things to take care of myself. Art isn't one of them. I don't suffer if I don't write books. I don't suffer if I don't do creative projects. My clients do, for sure. My wife does. My friends do. And I need their art. I very much see myself in the ecosystem of it and in a sort of a mutual reciprocity with them. But I really see for people who have that deep, profound compulsion inside of them, this is an element of their life that they must have in order to process their experience on the earth. And I'm just not like that. Like I need other stuff, but I don't need that thing.
Well, one of the things that I think it's important to acknowledge is that this event is sponsored by Women and Children First, one of the few feminist bookstores that is still with us in community. And I know how much feminist practice has shaped not only your professional life, but your personal life and the relationships that that you value. And so how has you talk about in the book, feminist practice, 12-step, counseling psychology, these very influential modes of thinking, how they've contributed to your practice. So I want to talk a little bit about how feminism has provided perhaps the grounding or a framework for you to engage artists.
Oh, well, you were there for the early feminist.
I was there for the
days. The insufferable days, right? The insufferable feminist immersion.
There was a lot of button making, but it was all
so many buttons.
Beautiful struggle.
There's many tattoos that'll tell the story. Feminism is one of the grounding ways in which I understand the world. And I was very influenced. You brought back in the late 90s Bell Hooks into my life because you went to a religious studies conference and you brought back cassette tapes of an incredible speech by her in like 1998. And you played me these tapes and I was like,
wait, there were cassette tapes?
There were cassette tapes from a religious studies conference.
I remember that.
She delivered a talk about love. And we were like, love? Is that a thing people talk about? And she blew both of our minds.
Yeah, I remember that.
And so that was like, it was like both of our feminisms that were forming in the late 90s were grounded in this beautiful way by those particular messages of Bell Hooks before even her All About Love series came out. Oh man. So, but feminism is sort of like the lens, one of the lenses through which I see everything. And that, it's like the water I drink. It's like the DNA of me that like nobody's free until everybody's free, that we live in these intersecting systems of domination. And that, let's go back to that Bell Hooks quote from that tape. I used to write this on boards, on blackboards when I would do Feminism 101 workshops at the University of Missouri. Her quote from those tapes was, loving justice means seeing the interconnectedness of systems of domination, which, was like years before intersectionality had its like sort of pop culture moment, like years after Kimberly Crenshaw coined the phrase. But, so understanding intersecting systems of domination was the feminist root that I rested on. And that's never changed. That is sort of like the ground the academic and in-person groundwork that makes me up. So it's like the filter through which everything else goes through.
One of the things that you've long prioritized in your work is to really think about the cultivation, not just of kind of artist practice, but the real confrontation with what the various art worlds are like for queer artists, for artists of color, for artists that are not pedigreed in the ways that their kind of framework, determines that. And so I'm just curious, what are some ways that you think that your practice and thinking about these issues also helps us leverage our response and critiques of sometimes the exclusionary and ridiculous worlds in which artists are trying to do their work?
Yeah, I'm very lucky that when I started working in the arts in San Francisco in the late aughts, I was mentored and sort of brought up by arts activists who created cultural equity funding in the arts in the 90s in San Francisco. So I was sort of schooled in the way of that you have to first get resources from where they're being held and distribute them to queer and trans artists, artists of color, women, people with disabilities, immigrants, and anyone else who has been marginalized from dominant cultures in the art world. That was the primary center of what our mission was to get these resources and make them widely available, and then teach all these people how to get more of the resources while they were also dismantling the system that had been exclusionary to begin with. That both things happened at the same time. And so that's how I was taught to work in the arts, with fundraising, with arts administration, with how curation should work, what this world should look like. And I think a lot has changed, at least on the visible side of different art worlds, and at least what institutions want to project is happening, right? Like Nike loves Black people. Every corporation is like, we love Black Lives Matter.
I mean, the McDonald's Black Lives Matter tweet, epic. Look it up, everyone. Look it up. Go ahead.
The epilogue to your most recent book franchise is the McDonald's Black Lives Matter tweet. So the corporations, the sort of like dominant structures of every art world is not different from corporations. It's just about centralized white money and power. And those structures want to keep themselves safe. And the way to sort of dismantle them is inside and outside. That has to happen both at the same time. And so I can't remember the original question because then I just got so excited about critiquing all of these systems. But it's basically helping artists figure out like how, no matter what's happening in the institutional worlds of your discipline, how can you exist outside of it and work on the inside? And wherever you want to be on the continuum is where we can focus. But how do we get resources that are being hoarded at the top and distribute them to as many people as possible, and then make that a cycle that keeps continuing over and over and over again? That the end goal of anybody's feminism should not be, well, I got rich, so I guess we've solved equality, it's done, right? That it like nothing stops until all resources are redistributed.
Well, one of the things that as we wrap up, folks, please start thinking about your fantastic questions for Beth that we can close this event with. I want to remind you that a question is a search for knowledge. A comment is a reflection. So we're looking for questions right now. But if you want more opportunities to reflect with Beth, I highly recommend her homework club. I want to talk to you also about something that is not in the book, but because I know you, is a large part of you, is humor. You are really funny. And
You're really funny.
You're really funny. No, and I think that there is something, if you don't identify as an artist, that's your business. But I do think that you do identify with someone who has an understanding of humor's many functions, and you're actually really good at it. And so one of the things that I think is really compelling about the work that you do that's public facing with Homework Club is that there is a centering of joy even in the midst of the ways that we have to deal with the hurdles. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about your joy practices. How do you remain so humorous and so joyful in the midst of actually working with people through a lot of very difficult things?
Oh man, because what is better than laughing about all of it, which is what you and I always did. Everything that is painful is also so funny, right? Like it's all very funny too. It's all at the same time. And my favorite people are very funny. I really like gallows humor and very bleak humor and the incendiary without sarcasm. So like humor, like laughing without any person suffering from the laughing, at least not in the room. I'm married to somebody who does stand-up comedy and is a comedian, I would say. And mostly she steals my jokes. Like I'll say it quietly and then she takes it and says it loudly, or she takes it and writes it into a script, or I'm sure she'll have a comment that's not a question whenever it's time for questions about this. But yeah, who's funny? Smart people are funny.
Smart people are really funny.
Smart people who read books are really funny.
And if you read this book, you'll become smarter and funnier. Folks, I'm going to end our formal Q&A before we start talking about the late 90s. And I'd love to bring up the questions. Are they in the chat? Are they in a hat? I don't know where the questions are. This is where the webinar starts to break down, folks.
It becomes anarchy so fast.
I don't know what the questions are.
Oh, maybe people haven't asked any questions.
Oh, it looks like people haven't asked it, because you have to go to the ask a question box, which is right here.
Right there.
So ask a question.
Ask a question. And you can ask anything.
Ask an AMA with Beth.
AMA. Ask me.
Okay, the first question is fabulous. How do you find your community and your audience?
How do you find community? Me personally, or like how does one?
How about how does one? Let's not always talk about you.
Don't make it about me. Okay. Start with the things that are important to you. I mean, I believe Nicole J. George is out there in the crowd tonight. And I know her advice is often like volunteer for the things that are important to you, and you will find friends and community immediately. When you do things that reflect your values out in the world, you're going to find some people so fast. That is such a fast way to find your people. And, for artists, one of the things I think artists need, and that I'm always nagging all of my clients about, is developing intimate relationships with other artists, having an artist community. And how do you get that? And how do you have that during a time when you can't like physically be with very many people? To the best of your ability. If you have access to one person, if you know one other artist, just even though it can feel so hard to pick up the phone or to make a plan, it will feed you so much energy. It will feed you tenfold if you spend a little bit of time being with another artist as an artist. Like we're going to talk, we're going to hang out, we're going to talk as one artist to another. Tell me what you're working on. I'll tell you what I'm working on. That will feed you.
That's beautiful. Oh, this is a great question. From, I believe, Nicole G, maybe Nicole George's. Why don't you like to share desserts, Beth?
Oh, I wondered if this confrontation was going to come up. This is a root story of Marcia and my friendship back from 1997. Remember the night we met at a cafe and you were like, do you want to split a brownie? And I said, no, I don't share desserts. But you decided to be my friend anyway, even though I freaked out.
It was really hostile, everyone. It was really hostile. It was weird. But again,
I still am like that. Exactly.
It hasn't changed.
I would rather not have it than share it with someone.
Jesus. Someone asked what we're currently reading or watching right now. What are you reading or watching?
So I am reading Hanif Abdurraqib's new book, A Little Devil in America. Is that the title? About Black performance. And I'm also reading Lauren Collins' book, Falling in Love in French. Is that the title? She's a New Yorker writer who wrote a memoir about living abroad and having to learn French. And she's a really good writer. And I'm watching Shtisel.
Ooh. I just had a kid 3 weeks ago. So I'm reading like all these social justice warriors. Kids. No, I'm not Googling anything how to take care of this baby. I guess I shouldn't say this in the webinar, but anyway, I'm reading a lot of children's books. They're so sweet. They're so much better than when we were kids. They have people of color, and they have like queer kids, and like it's all just like love makes a family. Everyone is wonderful. It is so beautiful. And if you also want social justice children's books, I have a feeling that Women and Children Bookstore is where you should get them.
I bet Women and Children First have them.
Oh my God, they're so wonderful. Okay, can you speak to your own relationship with social media and whether you feel it's important for artists? Ooh, this is a good one, Lindsay M. Where to begin with this one, Beth?
So the reason Homework Club has a private hidden Instagram account that only club members get access to is because that's where I constantly tell everyone to get off of Instagram. Like the whole function of that is for me to tell people, hey, everyone, it's Wednesday. How about you delete this app until Monday? That is the reason we have an Instagram account, is for me to ask everyone to get off the internet, truly. And as soon as I'm done promoting the book, like starting June 1, I'm going to be off of Instagram for like 3 or 4 months because I've been on it so much, feeding the beast for this. I think it's a marketing tool, and you have to remember it is a corporate platform that does not love you. It does not care about you. It's there to make money, 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 money for the people who own it, which is Facebook. When you remember that, you can sort of like have a perspective of how to shrink it down to what it's good for and how to like have less of what it's not good for. And as soon as you find that you're starting to use it in ways that are self-harming, it's just time to delete it. Even for 24 hours, you can feel better. Even 24 hours.
That's really amazing and so true. When you tell me to like delete my Instagram for the weekend, I get scared. I do it, and then I realize I'm writing more and I'm thinking more.
Yeah, and you're not missing anything. When you get back on, you're like, oh, I've missed nothing.
The next question is, how do you make your art no matter what without linking your worth with productivity and not resting? Ooh. I feel indicted.
Yeah, that you're being attacked there. One of the things I ask all of my clients to do, and this is in the time chapter of the book, is I ask everybody to take one day a week when they are not doing anything for day jobs to earn money or anything related to their creative practice. They can do anything else on that day, but they have one day that they protect. It can be Shabbat. I mean, all these thousands of years of Jewish wisdom can't be wrong. It can be a different 24-hour period, but to protect a day when they are not trying to be productive workers. It's not like you don't have other work to do, just not that work, right? When we sort of can reset our priorities every week, that work supports our lives, it helps support our life. That's not our life, that our life is much bigger and work is a part of it. It can help sort of realign priorities. And things like relationships and the self and a spiritual interior and care, all these other things, how much they matter gets turned up a lot. And it doesn't just become work, which then helps erode those feelings of, if I didn't earn this amount of money or I wasn't productive in this way, then I'm not valuable.
Oh, that's so good. What daily rituals or habits are most important to you, Beth?
Oh, well, I have my death journal right here.
Oh, God.
So every day I take a moment. It looks like I didn't do it yesterday. The last day was Monday, when I wrote on Monday, my own body cannot protect me from death. So every day I take a moment and I have a contemplative moment, remembering that I'm going to die. That is very important. I have to do stuff for my body every day. Like I did yoga this morning and I was in a much better mood having done that. Those are really important. Taking my meds, that 10 milligram of Lexapro makes all the difference, as do my 4 matchas. What about you, Marcia? Marcia, what do you do?
Oh my God. Panic. Just kidding. My
pre-baby.
I know. My daily practice, I always try to find one thing to be joyful about. And sometimes that's me texting you or texting your wife. I think she's funnier. But I always try to, I'm in the heart of the stuff, right? Like the classes I teach about racial violence, the types of things I'm asked to like comment on. And so I try to prioritize my joy life as much as possible. Sometimes it involves reality television. Sometimes it involves like, there's an account on Instagram where they call out all the people who wear counterfeit designer bags on Real Housewives. Some of you know, it's so funny. They don't tag the people, but it's like this guy and he's like really good at spotting fakes. And I don't know why this brings me so much joy, but it does. And some days like that's literally all I have. And so my joy practice is my daily practice.
That's amazing.
Someone is inquiring about that piece of art behind you. Can you tell us about In Goddess Dress behind you? I love this painting in your home.
It is made of, it's all yarn. It's made by a Los Angeles artist named Miki Yamashiro. She's also a professional wrestler called Candy Payne. You can find her on the internet. And she makes incredible art. And when I saw this piece, I knew I had to have it. It says "Burn Money, Act Up." I love this artwork so much.
Oh, it's so good. What's your most embarrassing 90s concert? Oh, who Chris Vargas asked that? I just saw the name.
Damn it, Chris Vargas. Don't ever ask a question for him. Oh, we both have to answer. We both have to answer.
What is the answer?
I mean, there was a lot. Like there were a lot of bad 90s concerts. We went to some embarrassing 90s concerts.
I know, but
together.
which one? It can't be In Sync because that was Fire.
No. Well, that was Fire, and that was 2001.
Oh, good call. Destiny's Child
was amazing. They were so good live. I remember thinking like that lead singer is going places. She's really good, and now she's Beyonce. Mike Waters is saying he knows the answer. Embarrassing concert we went to.
Why are all the people you know from your early 90s years here?
I mean, I saw Dave Matthews multiple times in college because we had very good friends who loved Dave Matthews.
Wait,
and so
did you?
Yes, you were there too.
I didn't go.
You didn't go. Remember when we went to see Fish? When we took the taxi from Chicago?
That was pretty good. Wait, I never went to a Dave Matthews show.
You never went? I thought you got roped into one of them.
No,
I went to at least 2.
I was really good at roping myself the hell out of things. Okay,
that Fish show wasn't embarrassing. It was fucking awesome.
Back to people who are actually looking for real things other than our banter. How do you help artists take the steps to share work that we've poured heart, soul, and epic vulnerability into, and how to make peace with the fact that maybe it might be ripped off if it goes on the internet? Ugh, that's so upsetting.
Yes. I just got called out for going to G Love and Special Sauce. Yes, I did. Okay. Anyway,
Jesus, you did.
So, but talking about things that are more lofty, like how to help people. Okay. So I also saw Reverend Horton. Yes. The list is coming out now. I'm getting trolled by people who know my 90s experiences. So you make this work and then you have to put it out in the world for people to rip off, for people to say bad things about. I mean, like people are tripping themselves on the internet to give me 2 stars for a book they read a free PDF of on
How
Goodreads.
Dare you?
They're tripping over themselves to be like, this book was only okay and I didn't finish it and I got it for free, by the way. You know what I mean? But like, so the thing about ripping off, this is a real problem in all artwork, especially people who work in the realm of visuals and design, certainly music. I think for one thing is just remember, like, there's nothing new under the sun. And so sometimes you will find that you are making something that many other people have plucked out of the ether too. It doesn't mean that anyone's ripped each other off. It means that it's a big world and people are dealing in the same materials and themes and content. And it's possible someone will copy you at some point. But I want you to respond to that if and when it happens and not keep your life limited and small in fear of that. Because although there are financial and like legal consequences in some cases, being imitated, it's really because you're amazing and people want to be like associated with the kind of things that you're doing. But once you make a work and put it out into the world, I want you to consider it's not yours anymore. It belongs to the world. It belongs to the audiences. Like, this book is not mine anymore. I said what I said. I wrote it in 2019, and now it's in the hands of the people who read it and decide what they think about it. It's not mine to hold on to anymore. I have to turn it over and then detach from the outcome. Will people like it? Will it be popular? Will no one read it? Will people troll it? I have no control over that. I can decide if I'm paying attention. I can also decide to put my attention elsewhere. So I want you to make the work and help it be in the world so that it can get to the people who need it.
That's really powerful. This is a question about place. What are the best cities to live for creative writers, especially nonfiction and fiction curious?
Well, what are the best places to live? I mean, I think Los Angeles. I think LA is the best place to live. I mean, it's true that there are some places that are good for writers in terms of having writing community and opportunity. But in terms of being able to have a writing practice, those cities are also really expensive. And it means that a lot of your time is going to be about earning money so that you can afford to live in that city that you're trying to write in and have a literary community in. So I don't think there's any right or wrong place, but I think it's important to think about, like, okay, what do I want out of my writing career soon? Not 20 years from now, but like, what do I want now and in the near future? If it's, I want lots of opportunity and I want a robust literary community around me, then you probably want to live in a city. You probably want to live in a place that has a lot of other writers and in a very active writing community. It doesn't have to be New York. It can be many other places. If it's, I want to be really productive, I want lots of time to work on my art, then you might want to live in a place that's very affordable, where you don't have to hustle so much to pay the crazy cost of living, like LA, DC, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago. So I think there's no right or wrong, and you can be a writer anywhere. I see somebody saying Minneapolis isn't that expensive and there's lots of funding. It's true. You might move to Canada, where there's far more funding for artists than in the United States. Same thing with Western Europe. But anyway, there's no bad place, but I want you to think about what's important to you in the next couple of years of your writing life.
This is a question from Jen. If you could give artists a hot tip about what a great website looks and feels like, what would you offer?
Oh man, I might not be the right person for that. I didn't have a website till like 2018.
Really?
Yeah, because I like, and you know, we're in Generation Catalano.
We're the Zillennials. Yeah,
we're Zennials. So there's a little part of me that's like, oh, it's cooler if I don't have one, because then it's like not marketing is my marketing. And then I was like, oh, you can't sell a book like that. But I think what I ask of my clients for their websites isn't so much about the aesthetic, because I think that can just reflect what you like, but it should be clear. People should be able to find what they're looking for, and it should be updated, like your bio, your CV, your work samples. It should reflect what you want the world to know of your work right now. So it should not be an ancient Tumblr. It should be something that reflects you now.
Beth, what was your first email address in college?
C714051@showme.missouri.edu. Do you remember yours?
C715396@showme.missouri.edu. And that is how you can tell how old we are. All right, folks, we are getting to our last question, or maybe I should, I'm going to ask Beth the question I often say to my students. So Beth, what's the final word on the topic of how to make your art no matter what? What do you want what do you want the final word to be?
The final word is the conclusion of my book. Life's going to get in the way. It will take you away from your work. Every day is an opportunity to come back to it. Your work, your art is not going anywhere. It's with you. It is you.
That's so beautiful. On behalf of Beth Pickens and my friendship, I want to thank everyone for coming to support this incredible book, Make Your Art No Matter What, which I think is not only about the creative process, but it's also living a life full of meaning and joy and impact. And I know that for those of you who know you very well, we know that that has been your contribution to all of us for so many years. And for those of you who are new to Beth's writing, I will guarantee that if you invest some time into learning all of her wisdom, that you will see this incredible change and growth in your own life, because I can attest to it. So Beth, thank you and congratulations on an incredible book.
Oh, Dr. Chatelain, thank you so much. In your sleep deprivation for being here with me. It has been a joy to see your face.
I haven't slept in 21 days.
Thank you both so much for this conversation. Thanks to everyone who came to watch. I hope that you have a great night.